Hello, and I'm Ann Tice. I've been a master gardener for 21 years and loved every bit of it. I was asked by a garden club in Michigan to give a talk on my side garden. Well, I thought, yeah, I have a side garden, but I decided I would make a little bit more complete information about showing many of the other master gardeners side gardens that I visited over time. So I'm going to try to share screen now and we'll see how this works. So, side gardens by Ann Tice, and I'm an MD, an advanced master gardener, an avid rabid gardener, or an ARG, and a genealogist. So bear with me with this. So I'll first be going over some basic principles and then looking at individual gardens. And this lecture, I've added on a little bit extra at the end, a bonus bit, which is another side garden. I couldn't find the pictures to it when I gave this lecture originally. And so I've got those tacked on at the end, and it's worth staying for if you like. So what are side gardens? Well, side gardens can be ignored by many people, but they can be not just a freeway to the back, but a pleasant highway to heaven. And let's start.
Have a lot of different uses, and I think we underplay them quite a bit. A lot of people just think, oh gosh, I'll just have yews down the side of my yard. Well, they can be so much more. They can be decorative. They can be productive with vegetables or herbs. If they're off the kitchen, they can be a quick path into your edibles. And often we'll have utilities on the side, such as an air conditioner and other things. They're great for storage. A gardener has to have storage for things like compost, a wheelbarrow, and supplies. And that's usually where we put them, as in the side garden, or often can be. They can make a great nursery for small plants or healing in plants. And they're a good area to use for hardening plants off, especially if you have a fence around it. The fences are great because it'll cut down the wind damage that can happen in central Illinois. And when you're thinking about designing your side garden, you can use the same garden design principles as you would any place. Color is important. You can have color with plants, combination of plants, or objects. Textures are important to think about. If you have all fine foliage, it's not as interesting as if you accentuate a few plants that have large leaves or bold foliage. The form makes it more interesting. If you have some that are upright, or if you have mounding or weeping plants, that creates a better environment to look at. A focal point is important. And on a side garden, you could actually have several focal points to slow the journey down as you go through it. A pathway is helpful to leading you on to another area. And repetition of plants is also excellent with design. You can either repeat the same plant or the same color to pull the eye onward and make the whole area more cohesive. Things to consider. Is your side garden or both of your side gardens sunny or shady? The person on the left here has got a sunny portion of her yard. She has a lot of sun annuals and some nice arborvitae behind them for screening from the neighbors. The garden on the right is pleasant, but you've got a tall fence, the brick of the building, and I wouldn't think it'd have a lot of sun there too much of the time, although the plants, which look like mostly sunny plants, are doing fairly well. But if you have an area that's shady, then you might consider putting in some of the more shade tolerant and shade loving plants, hostas and Heuchera. This person put a side garden in. This is screening the front or the street. And what a relaxing place with the chairs there, a birdhouse, a little sculpture hanging on the trellis, and some vines. So side gardens can be interesting and you can make them private. This person has a wooded side garden with a sharp ravine off to this side. And she's done a lot of the things that I like. She has a central focal point of the bird feeder, some tall upright plants, and a wonderful combination of happy colors in her sunny area. As that garden goes through this gravel path, it changes to head out here. There's a bench, and beyond that, a lake. She's repeated the same style of birdhouse, that she did on the sunnier part with the shady area here. And this is an upside down pot, which keeps the squirrels from running up there and stealing a lot of the birdseed. But in the middle of this plant or this path going through of her garden, she's got an indented area right off the kitchen. And what a great place to have coffee and a view. So the side garden can be a lot of things. It doesn't just have to be a way to get to the back. Here she's got a focal point, and I love this color echo with the orange impatiens and the burgundy Japanese maple. It's a beautiful view to have coffee at. If you have a wider side garden, you can do more things. And it doesn't matter what kind of design your garden has. It's your garden. You should enjoy whatever you like there. If it's more formal like this, or if it's a very formal garden, whatever suits you is great. But here, there are a lot of things going on, and it's fun. So she's got a trellis structure for vine. She's got upright container, a gourd for the birds, an interesting little resting place, a bench, and some fun objects such as this giant toad, a water feature, and a dry stream bed. So it's whatever you feel like. And this looks like a comfortable and a fun side garden. Now you have to consider if you have a small or large area. This is a photo I took at the Sheffield Garden Walk in Chicago. These are 1890s houses. They're brick, they're 2 stories, and there's very little room between them. But look at how this woman has stopped just to admire things. So she didn't shoot right back to the backyard, but there's lots of interesting things to catch your attention when you go through. The beautiful impatiens, they use every scrap of soil. She got some water features here, fountains, an elevated structure, adding height, some hanging baskets, and more a bird bath there. So this is a lovely way to slow down your journey, getting front or the back of the garden. In Chicago and Sheffield Garden Walk, they use every tiny bit of soil. Tiny hostas here and a pedestal with a plant container on it. A nice idea, a broken terracotta pot with some plants spilling out of it. Fine textured plants here, contrasted to the bold hosta, and it makes for a very pleasing design. What if you have a wider garden? Many of you will recognize this person's garden as a plant connoisseur and collector. It's just gorgeous. You've got miniature conifers, various colors, foliage echoing all the way through, weeping structures with height, burgundy and chartreuse foliage. And this is from the top looking down. I was delighted to be able to visit this garden and take photos a few years back. And if you're at the bottom and you look up the steps, you still have an incredible display of colors, plants, textures, and shapes. What a joy to be able to have a wide side garden. It's amazing. So this is a close-up view with some Heuchera and all the other fascinating Gamma-Cypris, all these wonderful evergreens here and conifers. Transitions is another thing to consider. This is another one of my, what I'll call a black belt gardener. I have adored her. She's an exceptional plants woman. And this is her front yard with a happy combination of lots of perennials. But if you transition from this grass around her side garden, it becomes even more interesting. This is the path back to her, this is her backyard. So this is her side garden here. And look at the stunning plant combination. She is one of the best people I've ever met to combine some different plants. She gave me seeds of this little plant here, Verbascum chalksii. I love it. It's yellow or white with a purple eye, and it's delightful to sprinkle around in a sunny area. But as you look through this narrow grass path, here is her little windmill decoration. And now on this side, on the right side, you're looking back toward the street again. And there's the windmill again. But it looks different here. You've got a widening out of the grass path. She's repeated the burgundy color throughout, a sweep of daylilies, and overall, it's just a treat to go in this side garden. Transitions are important for bringing the side garden around to transition into the main part of the backyard. This cat is still alive. He's 17 years old. He was my outdoor feral cat, Mr. Bob, and he loved to trot down the side garden out into the main one. I'll point these out later. This is what I call my bonsai peach. It was trying so hard to get away from the arborvitae, which worked as a great screen from the neighbors. This is another master gardener's yard, and the side yard entered the backyard here. And what a treat to be able to go over this little bridge to enter into her backyard. Another transition to the side yard. In this case, the stone material transitions you around, and the hostas and the Heuchera are repeated around onto the side garden back here. So it makes a lovely transition from one area of the yard to the other. Paths are important, particularly on a side yard where it may not be as wide as an opening of a front or a backyard. You can have stone surrounded by mulch on a path. This one is stone with a ground cover or short grass. And the paths help make a mystery. You wonder, well, what is around this curved path and where is it going to lead to? A lot of the garden designers will talk about having rooms of a room. If you have a gate, an entrance, or a curved path, it will lead you to another area, another feeling of the garden. So side gardens can be useful for that. They add mystery. Here's another example of a path. These are stone steppers on gravel. And this is that other super duper garden with all sorts of color of foliage. And his other side goes out to the street where you've got grass and gravel on the side. So you can have any type of, a lot of different type of materials to make a path through the side yard. Here's grass blending into stones with a focal point at the back. And it's lovely to have these two matching urns with some foliage in it, kind of framing the view of that focal point, the bench. It's helpful if you slow the journey down, and you can do that several ways. You can do it with focal points, plant combinations, or interesting objects. Well, this has it all in one. She used a bunch of galvanized buckets, and you've got a fine texture here, bold texture of the canna. I like how that dusky purple of the salvia flows through here into the ageratum and down to the salvia. So she's kind of continuing that full of color and accentuated with coral and oranges. This is a great entrance into her side yard. You can do a color echo. A painted board looks very close to the purple of Heuchera frosted violet. And it's a nice bigger texture here with chives and finer texture other plants. This is a great combination on the right with sedum. I think these are the right names. Others can correct me if I'm wrong. But this looks like sedum purple emperor, lady's mantle, and I have these written down in the handout. Conocloa macra, the variegate, aureola there, combined with a hosta and a cute little pot of hen and chicks. But that's got it all. It's just foliage, and it's just beautiful with all the different colors. That would make me stop and want to see what those plants were. Other great plant combinations, a caramel colored Heuchera, the hellebore fetidist. I'm assuming this is a big bold leaf of Brunera with a purple Heuchera and a little tiarella. So you've got bold and fine textures and a lot of great color combinations. Same thing over here, chartreuse hosta, a smaller hosta, fine texture, and another beautiful Heuchera. And what a great thing to have on the side garden as you pass through. You can make interesting objects to slow down that journey and make the travel through it more interesting. Tiny hostas in a holy rock, or a cute little moss turtle with hen and chicks on it in between the Heuchera and hosta. You can put fun objects on the side. Here's a great combination of shade plants, which is suitable for many side gardens as they're often shady, with a rusty squirrel in the middle or a peacock strutting in the back of all the shade plants. The wonderful plants woman I was talking about also did incredible plant combinations. She was an expert. She helped design the original idea garden, and she would stack plants, which worked great in many ways. I think this is Astrantia, Moulin Rouge. I believe that's Purple Emperor, Veronica, and Northern Sea Oats. And over here, a Burgundy Barberry with a PG hydrangea with just a hint of pink in it. And I'm not exactly sure what this is, but it looks to me to be a lace cap hydrangea. Something like the one that's out now, Let's Dance, would make a very nice combination of colors and stack that view of plants all the way up, which also serves as a screen from the neighbors when their plants are stacked like this. You don't always have to have a fence. Screening from the neighbors. I didn't want to look out my living room into their bedroom. So I've got arborvitae along here, and eventually they grew pretty thick, and it was very helpful. I could still enjoy my neighbors, I could enjoy my garden, but not have to look at areas I didn't want to see. Obviously, a fence is always a solution. And here's, this is Barb's garden. She loaned me these pictures. I'm delighted because it shows almost everything that I would like to tell you about. Screening, transition, paths, objects, plant and color combinations, and it's utilitarian. So an object here, a chartreuse leaf casting, echoes the chartreuse hosta beautifully. A path leads through in transition to the backyard. And a lot of designers say if you have a gate, it also helps designate the garden rooms that you may pass from one to the next. But again, there's good color combinations, pots here, and I believe this is the before picture, fence for screening from the neighbors. It looks like this is the after picture with the variegated shrub or tree grown a lot bigger. And they took out the Japanese maple and put in a pergola there. But again, like every gardener, this is a handy place to store storage and wheelbarrows in the back there. It's not seen from the front yard, but as you come around here, you've got to have some place to store things. And she thought of a very good way, she and her husband, to do this. Because this is on the side, they had kind of a potting bench in a way made here for their plant sales. And who wouldn't want to stop and check out all these different kind of hostas and see if there's anything on sale that you could buy as you go through to her beautiful backyard. Here's the other side of her garden, and there's a focal point at the end. You see this light turquoise chair. You come around here, there's big evergreens, arborvitae, a fence to screen from the neighbors, so it's a private side yard. But as you come through it, look at all the wonderful things, objects that are up high, some height here, and it's a mirror. The mirror is a wonderful idea for a narrower space to reflect. And she's painted the water barrel green so that when you're sitting here having coffee right off the kitchen and you look down this side yard, you hardly see the green of that water barrel in front with the arborvitae. And this is another lovely area. Why not enjoy your side yard and make use of it? It's helpful if you can frame the view. This is a botanic garden with hanging gourds, but I did about the same kind of idea with a trellis as you enter into our very full side garden, which has a lot of produce in it. This is, I'm going to change things a little bit. This is what I've learned from my various yards. Here's my yard in Illinois on the left and our present yard in Michigan. That's the backyard. This is where the deer, but the antelope do not roam. There are deer everywhere. They decimate everything they can. It's pretty hard to grow hostas, but I'll show you how I've tried to there. First thing about that I've learned is the practicality aspects. There's the soil. It's important if you can, particularly on the side yard where there may have been a lot of compaction, to amend the soil as much as possible and check the pH. This is the Illinois garden. I had heavy subsoil. When they dig out lakes in the Champagne garden, they would take off the topsoil, scoop out a lake, and give you that subsoil as your area to garden. I got real mad one day and I had with a friend, dug up a whole bunch, got rid of it. And there was some of that gray clay that I found. I squished it into a little pot and had it fired. It's such heavy clay soil, I made a pot out of it. This is in Michigan, where they spent a year running over everything and compacting it as they were building the house. And then they brought in what I consider gravel for my topsoil, so it does not drain. Practicality, drainage. This looks okay, but I should have had a clue when I would walk through here after watering the grass and lose my shoe in the muck. This area did not drain. It's this part of the lot is way above the lake that's in the back, and there was no drainage at all going down the hill because of the compacted soil from construction. It looks okay here where the trellis was put, but at the base of this trellis, water continued to seep and pool and didn't move. So drainage installed from along the house under this path to relieve that water that was backed up. Another practicality thing to think about, critters. Well, you've got rabbits, angry squirrels, Bambi, and the five-striped ground squirrel, otherwise known as chipmunks. They're tremendously destructive, and they love to burrow in and out of any type of retaining wall and have a voracious appetite, much like the other critters do. What I found when I was looking up the chipmunks is they're also called timbered tigers because they run all around in the timber areas, and we do have a wooded lot. Even sand cranes, I was met by this pair in my front yard when I went out to get the newspaper. Sand cranes are kind of obnoxious. They act as rototillers in people's yard. And for the first 3 years I lived there, every time I planted ground cover in our backyard, they would come and shred it up and throw it out about 5 feet. So they're interesting and noisy, and they do rototill your yard. Hence, I've got things like a peach tree jail. Our homeowner will not allow a fence of any kind. So you just tell everybody this is not a fence. These are trellises and they're decorative. So I had to put these around my peach trees, and it's lined with very heavy-duty deer netting so they don't poke their heads in there and eat all the peaches and the twigs down too. This is what deer do. This is a block away from me. They just make arborvitae into popsicles if they feel like it. And your hosta lovers out there, when you find something you like, you get it in every color. Isn't that gorgeous? But how are you going to protect the hostas? I've got hostas in the back and through here and over here, and a lot of hostas I planted inside the Heuchera grass. Now, if you look at this area, I have bird netting over that. That's sad but true. I have tried every stinky spray, granule, clear off, everything possible. And the only thing I think it would really work would be a very high fence, and I can't do that. So we put bird netting around things. If you can't fence, try netting. These are half hoops, plant supports. There's one here, there's one here, and over all of this is a very thin bird netting. You can't see it that much. I can still enjoy my yard, but these have not been eaten down to a pulp, and they will do that if they aren't covered. They love daylilies. They have an amazing sense of how to come through and just eat the blossoms off. My first year in Michigan, I thought, gee, my daylilies aren't blooming this year. I don't understand it. Well, then I realized that they just nip it in the bud, literally. But these are the half hoops around it. And in your handout, I put these netting plant supports, which I think are really helpful from Gardener Supply. So they hold the netting up high, and then the hoops hold it off to the side. And I'll show you later that we've even put some this very see-through netting around our arborvitae to keep them from being popsicles. Okay. The first thing I'll talk about is some of the things we did in the Illinois garden. On the east side, this is the front yard, and as you go around, this is the transition to the shady east side. When we first moved there, I just dumped in any plant that I had extras of and didn't care about. After all, it was a side yard. Why pay any attention to it? And I just shoved a bunch of probably green fountain hostas in there, and it was a little boring. Also, there were wayward plants that seemed to grow quite a bit. The Tradescantia can become really weedy looking. And I thought, gee, I've got a big fireplace here. I'll put a trellis up and grow a rose on it. And it was never really happy because it wasn't enough sun on it. The transition to the back, I put a couple steppers which transitioned it into the main stone path that wrapped around the back of the house. And this was also helpful because this was a wet area. And then we also covered up the air conditioner with a fence. This panel here on the side had two little slots on each side that you could undo, and you could lift that whole panel off when the air conditioner needed to be serviced. But it looked a lot better looking at a fence, and I used it, you'll see in a little bit, in another way, not only to hide the air conditioner, but to make it a bit more attractive side yard. Over time, I added more color, a little bit different hostas, and because the rose never did well, we used a climbing hydrangea, which eventually got to the top of the fireplace wall, and I put the clematis, which doesn't need quite as much sun, Comtesse de Bouchard, and I'm not a French speaker, but that's what the name of that clematis is. It was beautiful. So hydrangeas, the clematis was added, some objects, and this is where you exit around the corner into the backyard here. I had 3 peach trees at the end, and they all bloomed and grew at, they all ripened at different times. They eventually looked like bonsai peach trees, but they were still quite productive. So this is the entrance into the backyard. Some objects here, that's Hosta Great Expectation. And one of my favorite little plants, that Crydalis lutea. It is one of the longest blooming perennials there are. And if it's happy, it'll come back every year. I like it for its fine texture. This is the end of the east side. The 3 peach trees were bountiful. I made an awful lot of cobbler, and this is from apples from the other part of the side yard. Looking back from the backyard, the transition with the cover for the air conditioner and a focal point, Mr. Bob showing off. Now, the other side of the yard in Illinois had more sun to it. And this is the transition from the driveway. There was a little concrete path going into the gated vegetable area. And I'll show you in a little bit how we kept critters out of that side area. But in the early spring, there's an arbor here with a rose and a clematis growing up it for height. This was a 4-grafted apple tree. And then you have a path going to an arbor as the focal point in the distance. In May, this is how the transition looked. You had a full front yard going off to where the side gate was, put a flower pot on top of the gate one year, clematis for height. And this is the gate where you enter into the vegetable garden. Now it's slatted fence, and between that and behind this part of the gate is chicken wire. So that kept all the rabbits and the critters that I had in Illinois out of my vegetables, and it worked very well. The slatted fence is also helpful because it allows the wind to go through, and you don't have as much mold and mildew. Whoops. Sorry. Anyway, I'll continue. This is the entry to the side. The path frames the arbor focal point, and there's repetition of the color and the daylilies as you go back. The arbor had not only the Zephrine Drohan rose on it, which is thornless, in case you were to snag yourself going by, it's over there, but also a clematis. So the 2 combined can be quite lovely to go through. This is a view from the back to the front. The front street is out there. And then also looking the other way from the front to the backyard. And that's where you enter the backyard. Focal points, painted boards with rainbow chard. And you've seen that picture before. The herb area over time. Initially, I started out, not time, you see time, T-H-Y. Another little joke. But eventually I added lettuce bowls, more decorative things, and some edible pansies. And these are painted concrete leaf castings, which color echoed with some of the annuals I planted in between the basil and chives. Behind this fence, it's raised there because it's a storage area. On the other side was compost and wheelbarrows and all sorts of odds and ends the gardeners need. We had a big plant move to Michigan. I dug up everything I liked. No one could tell. I moved them in laundry baskets with fabric, landscape fabric between them, and it worked pretty well. We just stuffed them in the trailer and put a board between the different levels of the plants, and I moved it over several times. Now, this is the Michigan garden, the reason why I'm giving you the talk, because they wanted to know how I did things. It's the beginning of it. Curved sidewalk coming around, and this is the only side garden I have now. The other is a steep ravine because it goes down a long ways to the lake. So we decided to have herbs and vegetables and fruit because it was right outside this kitchen door. And I thought, well, okay, that's good. I took along some of the peaches that had started from the seeds I had from the old peach trees in Illinois. I figured, okay, I'll plant 3 seedlings here, and whichever one lives wins. So I just put 3 in, even though I knew there was too much. And at a local nursery, I found another grafted apple tree. This time it has 6 different grafts on it, which is pretty nifty and still doesn't take up much room. This is at the start, the transition from the front around into the vegetable garden, which is in here. And the peach tree jail as you go farther on. And then after the peach tree jail, which is here, you go down the sidewalk and there's very steep steps into the backyard. This is a low care area. It's just Liriope, and it's the Liriope muscaride because that behaves itself. It's a tough ground cover. They even use it in zoos in St. Louis because people can stomp on it and it'll come back. It makes a great front of the border plant. And here's the arborvitae, which are covered with a deer netting because the deer are hungry. If you were able to see this very well and it had just rained, you might be able to detect there's a little netting because the netting circles all the way around them. And we have great arborvitae now, and the deer haven't turned them into popsicles. Here's the neighbor cat. He's at the top of the steps looking at the many, many chipmunks in the backyard. And there are a lot of chipmunks, and they love to get in my vegetable garden. And I'll show you that in a little bit. That's what it leads to. This is my backyard in Michigan where the deer roam freely and they are stomped all over everything. They even break those metal tough lands, or those little metal stakes like we have out at the Idea Garden. They just bend those over as they wander through. This is that side garden at the top of the steps looking toward the street. Where I've got, here's the air conditioners, there's my compost. And this time they have a little projection of the house. So at least you can't see all this garbage from the street. It's covered a little. Before and after we had drainage installed, and I raised it because this was still not draining very well, even with drainage installed. And now it's a lot better. It also helps to have this area elevated because it's easier for me with my arthritis to tend to that. Spring of 2018, this is my fence, which is not a fence. Don't let anybody tell you that's a fence. The homeowners, people wouldn't like it. It's very heavy duty deer things with rebar. And I don't think it's a fence. Here's the apple, a peach, which I decided was crowding everything too much. I did get rid of it. This is trellis forms for raspberries. There starts the compost, and then it goes down the hill by the peach tree jail. Now this is the transition from the front when the peonies are in bloom. You come around the side, these are the peonies, a gate and things that filled in pretty well. So when you pass through that, it makes for a different feel. The point of view and the framing is done by the arbor, and also this fabulous clematis, Betty Corning. It's a Viticella. Viticellas I love because they don't get the clematis wilt as often. And this has beautiful blue nodding bells. We have one at the Idea Garden too, and that's where I learned about it. It's to be cherished. 2019 entrance a little bit later with the Annabelle hydrangeas. This is inside the vegetable garden so that I can grow lilies that the deer won't eat. And then there's a bunch of vegetables on both sides. Mother's Day is a special time. Now, why would I put a fern leaf peony on the inside of a protected area to keep it from the critters? Because this is a special peony. They're very unique and they're beautiful, and they usually bloom around Mother's Day. Where I got this was from another descendant of my second great grandmother. She came from Baden, Germany in 1852. Her husband told her, "You can't bring anything else." She wanted to bring the fern leaf peonies because they reminded her of her mother. So she took these things. They look like very skinny yams, really skinny. She sewed them in her voluminous petticoats and brought them anyway. They survived the trip into New Orleans, up the Mississippi River, into Northeast Iowa. So I want to protect those. Voles would like to eat them. I planted them in hardware cloth wire baskets. And you could do the same thing for your hostas. And they bloom every Mother's Day when she remembered her mom back in Germany. And there they are. They are very spectacular. This is how I planted them, and I dug them up to move them to Michigan. They have a hardware cloth basket that they're sitting in. And I've done the same for hostas at our cottage, where we had lots of voles eating everything they could possibly eat. Now, what do I use this garden for? It's mainly for vegetables. And I've grown corn with carrots up front, or corn with potatoes up front, raspberries, an apple, tomatoes, herbs, just about everything I can squish in there. And it works pretty well. I grow 3 kinds of raspberries, and then this apple tree has got 6 different grafts on it. That makes it a little complicated because they don't always bloom at exactly the same time. And as you probably know, apples need to be cross-pollinated. So sometimes, because Michigan is a lot colder than Illinois, and we'll have cooler weather, the pollinators may not be out as much. Sometimes I'll take a little paintbrush and go from one blossom to the next to help them or form fruit a little bit easier. 2020, a view from the back entrance, and I'll explain a couple of things going on. This is early on, that's pak choi. Pak choi is a great little vegetable to put in stir fries, and you can grow it in just 3 to 4 weeks, which is astounding, but early season. And what a great thing to do during COVID is I went out and fussed in my yard. The utility of the side. I now plant the beans and the carrots up near this raised area so I can pick them easier. And how can you resist if you can teach a child to garden? This is my granddaughter. She loves picking carrots and beans. Some of the apples I grow out of that one tree. And I wanted to tell you about a couple other vegetables or things that I think are particularly good. I've trialed plants at the University of Illinois Trial Garden, the annuals mainly, for 20 years. And I like to run trials of other things. This is a gold raspberry, which is ever-bearing. I like that better than the Anne, because that usually just bears once a year. And I looked all over for kiwi gold. It's delicious. I couldn't find it anywhere except for Walmart, of all things. You could order from Walmart. I got it in 2 to 3 days, and they came shipped like this. It was perfect, and they all survived. So here's a combination of Heritage, which is my favorite red raspberry, and Everbearer, and the kiwi gold, and the peaches. I'm now down to 1 tree, and this is the one that won. I've tried snack peppers in the past, and that corn you saw in the back is on deck. It's a patio sweet corn. Supposedly, they're a little bit smaller ears, but supposedly you can grow it in a container. So in a small area, that's a good one to think about. Mascati beans are, I think, the best beans. I've tried a lot, from Blue Lake to who knows what. I don't like them if they have strings in them. This is a French fillet, and they're they're thin, very tender. They produce earlier and produce longer than other French beans. and they are, quote, dwarf, but that means they just don't get as tall and fall over. And then I like growing the Yukon potatoes too. Tried a lot of carrots. I think the best is Nantas and some of my produce on the right. However, when you garden in a small space in a side yard, which sometimes gets a little bit more shade than you would like, and you live in Michigan, you can have a hard time with tomato blight. The seasons and the temperature can be a little bit cooler, a bit more rainy than in central Illinois. I tried these red discs because it's a fungus and it will contaminate your new plants by anything you grow it in or from splashing up from the soil. The red disc did not make up too much of a difference. I tested out several blight-resistant varieties of tomatoes. I grew some in pots that worked pretty well, and I tried to do mostly watering from below. It's also important to remove all the leaf material so that this fungus doesn't continue to infect things. The problem is with tomato blight, you need to rotate crops, and tomatoes and potatoes are both susceptible to it. And I just don't have much space to really rotate. But I'm trying my best. The pots helped. Sun Gold is my favorite tomato. Chocolate Cherry is pretty darn good too. And this is my, last year I tried out 3 different types of tomatoes. There is Legend, which is determinate, a lot of problems with cracking. Brandy Wise is one that's advertised to be early and late blight resistant. It was pretty good with a little cracking, but oddly, the tomato Whopper, which are these that look almost perfect, they say disease resistant. They don't specifically say they're blight resistant, but these did better than all of them. And that's Legend. They like to claim that, oh, it makes a really big tomato. And that was one of the very good ones, but the rest of them were so-so and had problems with cracking. In the spring of 2020, the Timber Tigers got 96 beans. These jerks, they can get in through anywhere. And I had baskets put over them that were lined with bird netting. And I don't know why they didn't eat this one, but they cleared out 96 right there in front of the rhubarb. That really irritated me. So I got up my game for the pests and all the critters that live in Michigan. And it was hard with COVID to get hardware cloth of all things. So this doesn't match. It's not very attractive, but that and rebars and the whole top here will lift off. That did work. So they did stay away from them. I was able to replant. And I thought you guys might want to know about this. You can get gardening aprons if you want a beer glass, or t-shirts saying wonderful things like Tisa's homegrown produce, and it'll name what town you're in, Champaign, Urbana, wherever. And I get a big kick out of wearing this. And they have a new style that says Gardening Hall of Fame. That caught my eye. The panorama of the side yard, which is why I'm giving this talk, of the entry, the transition, rhubarb, apple, basil, carrots, potatoes, raspberries, more clematis here for interest, and tomato in a pot, and peaches, and that's about it. Here's looking at you, and I hope you enjoyed this.
Okay, this was my ending slide, but I wanted to show you a bonus garden, and it's worth it if you might consider still listening. Bonus, a busy side street garden. This is an impressive garden. I couldn't find the pictures initially, but this woman's garden hit it out of the park for everything I've talked about in the design of gardens in general, and also for a side garden. So color, mixture of plants, some spectacular plant combinations, fine and bold textures. There's uprights, there's mounded plants, and it's certainly got a pathway. It's a sidewalk because this woman lives on an extremely busy street in Illinois, and a side street is here. So it's a corner lot, but she made the most of it. She has a gift for gardening. This is the upper side garden with a huge mounding up plants, and this is a view the other way. Now here's the really busy street, but The intersecting street goes right here. And this is the plants that she has right outside one of her lovely windows of her house. And oh, the plant combinations. She's got height, color repeated through it, and textures as you follow along the path. I mean, certainly there's a path here that you can see, the sidewalk. I'm enchanted by this garden. She has a lot of combinations such as chartreuse with burgundy and bright colors and blues mixed in. This is Comfrey, Axminster gold, Yucca, probably bright sword, Eryngium, I can never say that. And the Canna, Tropicana black, but look at that combination with some spectacular showboat flowers in there, like this blue globe type of flower. And here she mixes deep burgundies with a bold foliage texture of the Canna, or over here, a deep burgundy of Ligularia, Britt Marie Crawford, against the Comfrey, which is variegated. But also she sticks in some bright red colors of a red lily and some bright red Monarda in the back, along with the orange daisy-like flowers here. Colors and textures, she's got it all. She puts in annuals on the lower area. She's got a variegate nasturtium, a little gomphrena stuck in here, some zinnias, perennial allium. And on the right, a hyacinth bean, which grows up this willow pyramid later in the summer, matched up with a beautiful Hypericum alderberry purple. That color combination is just great. I now want to rush out and buy all of these plants. She also put edibles along this sidewalk garden. Here's kale red boar, the nasturtiums with the flower has a peppery taste. And on the right is sorrel with a burgundy vein to the middle of the leaf, juxtaposed against other burgundy leaf plants. Color and texture combinations, bright red lily. This is probably Heliopsis in the back. And on the right is a wonderful texture and color combination, a Heuchera with their bloom, the bright red Monarda again. And this is bronze fennel. She lets bronze fennel just kind of come up here and there through her garden, and it's truly delightful. Flower form, she has a variety of this with globe shapes and daisy-like shapes. On the left side is drumstick allium, which is not quite filled out and gotten color with Echinacea. And on the right is Echinops with the Echinacea below. So the coneflower. Anyway, it's a great combination. The upper sidewalk, she has stacked plants. I think this is Eryngium, the goat spirit up here, Echinacea, and beautiful brightly colored daylilies. She repeats the colors of the chartreuse as she goes along. And also, as you'll see in a bit, the blue-green colors are repeated. So here's a close-up of the stacked plants. What a gift for gardening she has. Here's repetition of colors and plants. Blue-green spruce with a donkey tail spurge. It's also blue-green. And then Tradescantia sweet cake, which is chartreuse, and the Yucca bright edge. Nice. I love these things. You've got to think about getting some Anthriscus Ravens Wing. It is a plant that has a fern-like foliage right here that's deep burgundy. It grows in the shade, and in the spring, it has white blossoms on it. This is a little bit past the spring bloom, but I like to cut these off after they mature and sprinkle it around in the shade area. But here she's contrasted it with a variegated grass, perhaps a miscanthus, and here with variegated Liriope. So Anthriscus Ravens Wing, I got my first seeds from Annie's Annuals, which is an online catalog. And I love that plant, and the deer and the critters don't eat it. Yay. This is her backyard. It's absolutely wonderful. She has a gift for combining colors in some of her objects with the plants that she grows. Her backyard is wonderful, but the side yard is also exquisite, and her dogs enjoy it. So here's that hell strip, as they call it, between the sidewalk and the street, and then stacked plants here. Anyway, a big thank you to all the master gardeners who've let me photo their gardens over the past 20 years. And so all of us could enjoy these gardens now. Thank you very much.